Welcome to our podcast, Not Exactly As We Expected. I'm your host, Christine Capassi, and I'm joined today by two more hosts, my husband, Sam Hendrickson. You want to say hi, Sam?
Hey, everybody.
And our incredible producer, who is typically behind the camera and not in front of the camera, we get to be joined by him today. His name is Cayman Haraki. He's a graduate of Suffolk University, and we proudly call him our nephew. I'd like to have him introduce himself.
Hi everybody. Cayman Haraki, graduate of Suffolk University, and yeah, great to be here.
And multi-talented. And today we are joined by a very, very special guest. His name is Robert Tanaka, and Robert is a Paralympian who has earned a bronze medal in judo. Robert, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Robert Tanaka. I did compete in the Paralympics for judo, and I graduated from the University of Southern California.
Oh, welcome today. So, for our listeners, for those of us who are new to understanding about Paralympics, Paralympics welcome athletes from 10 categories of impairment, strong athletes who are incredibly talented, and they may have some impairments, including muscle, range of motion, limb deficiency, length differences, shortness, hypertonia, ataxia, athesis, vision impairment, and some intellectual disabilities. Um, Paralympics are different than the Special Olympics. And, Robert probably has a lot more insight into understanding more about the differences between these two. Robert, can you give us some insight into your experience with the Paralympics and maybe the difference between the Paralympics and the Special Olympics?
Yeah, sure. So the Paralympics is actually run by the Olympic International Committee, um, and it happens every 4 years, like the Olympics. It's in the same host city. And it usually runs parallel 2 weeks after. So you have the Olympics, and then you have a 2 week break, and then they rerun everything for the Paralympics. The Special Olympics is usually more US centric kind of event, and they don't have any connections with the International Olympic Committee. So um, it's usually not in the same host city. Uh, the difference in terms of who gets to compete. So, like you said, the Paralympics is a little bit more for um, people who have a physical disability, and the Special Olympics tends to be more for those who have a mental disability. Um, yeah.
Great. I think an obvious question I have that I think maybe some of our listeners have. Robert, when you were competing in judo, are you only competing, even though it's Paralympics, are you competing only against blind opponents, or can it be a different kind of disability that qualifies them to compete against you?
Yeah, so for my sport, it was only those with the visual impairments.
Yeah.
Growing up, I competed in sighted judo, but for the Paralympics specifically and the qualifying events to get there, it was only for those with um, visual impairment or complete blindness. And we would actually all fight each other. So the way that they would try to balance that out, make it a little more fair, is you had three subcategories. We went B1, B2, B3. So B1 is completely blind. B2 is a little vision. Usually people can see like objects and shapes, and B3 is someone who has like my vision. I have 2400 vision, so as most people who are listening probably know what that means. But for every 20
Yeah.
feet a normal person can see, it takes me about 400 feet to kind of see. So um, yeah, that's kind of how at least my sport was broken down, and yeah.
Okay.
Oops.
Talk us a little bit, so I have, I fancy myself a lover versus a fighter. It's a little cheap joke, but I have been in a few scuffles back in the day playing soccer and whatnot. I can't imagine being in any kind of a physical contest with somebody and not being able to perceive something coming at me. I mean, so maybe this is my misunderstanding of judo in that it's not like a typical boxing kind of thing. But talk to us a little bit about, like, is it just this extrasensory perception that you learn to develop, intuition? How do you defend against,
Y-
that kind of thing? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So judo by itself, there's no striking in judo. It's
Okay.
it's a lot similar to wrestling and jujitsu, right? It's all grappling. For Paralympic judo specifically, you are always touching in contact with your opponent. If you break off,
Okay.
they stop the match, they reset.
Okay,
Um,
got it.
so in terms of that, right? So judo is, I think it's actually really good for people with a visual impairment because you learn how to feel your opponent's momentum, right? Judo
Uh-huh.
is like understanding your opponent's momentum to utilize that. Um, and obviously feeling it would be a lot faster than seeing it. So a lot of times when people who are sighted join judo, they like try to look at their opponent's feet, see where they're moving. But for people who learn with a visual impairment, um, tend to be able to, I guess, execute judo techniques a little bit better, later down the road, just because of the fact they can feel their opponent move, right? But yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're anticipating an offensive move and coming up with a defensive move to that based on how they grip you, where on their where on your body they're touching you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that is part of it. The other part is also the offensive part, right? So to win in judo, you have to throw your opponent flat on their back. So, well, that's the fastest way. There's also, you can pin your opponent. Um, I I always make fun of wrestlers because they only have to hold their opponent down in a pin for 3 seconds. We have to hold for 20.
Oh my
What?
Um,
goodness.
and you
Oh
can
man.
also submit your opponent like jujitsu. So you have arm locks and you have chokes. But judo by
Chokes? Did you
its,
say chokes?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, that doesn't sound friendly.
yeah. But I guess judo is most known for the standing, the throws, right? That type of
Uh-huh.
stuff.
Okay.
If you guys ever seen like John Wick or Kill Bill, those flips they do in the action scenes, right? That's
Hmm.
that is judo. Um, so if you can understand your opponent's momentum, right,
Mm,
you're able to lift this, I don't know, 200-pound guy up in the air like it's nothing just by using,
mm.
you know, physics, right?
Okay. Wow.
It's a beautiful, beautiful sport. And I
Yeah.
wondered when I learned about it and looked at it a little bit, what got you into it? What inspired you to go to this sport? Was it a family legacy? Was it, I, what got you into it?
It was a little bit of everything. So my family was pretty heavily into judo. My dad did it when he was younger. His cousin was an alternate for the Olympics in '84, I think it was. On my mom's side, there was we have a referee that refed at the Olympics in 2012 or 2008. So there was that aspect. The other part of it was, growing up, most of my friends and cousins did some sport, right? There was either basketball or karate or something, right? And I wasn't really able to do that type of stuff. One, because of the vision, or two, because I have albinism, so I can't be in the sun for very long. Um, and judo just kind of seemed like a good fit. It was indoors. There was Paralympic judo available. Um, and I was quite fortunate because the coach that I started with was a gold medalist from Sydney in 2000 in the Paralympics, and he actually sat in my chair to coach me in uh, the Tokyo Games in 2021. So, yeah, that was kind of how I kind of got into it, stayed with it. Yeah,
So your father was also involved in judo.
yeah,
Oh,
recreationally. Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess there was no back talking him when you were a kid, right? I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Robert, so I was wondering, when it comes to, you said said that judo is really good for visually impaired people, right? And I know that you had competed against people who you said were not
Hmm.
visually impaired growing up.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, do you feel like um, you had an advantage against them at some points because of your disability at some points? And I was wondering also, is like, do you feel like I know you done like extremely well against those opponents, growing up, like, just absolutely just crushing your competition. I was just wondering, do you feel like your disability actually had caused an advantage?
That's an interesting question. I would actually think, to be honest, growing up, it was more of the opposite. Um, I think learning, especially judo, is one of those things where it's kind of hard to learn, right? The learning curve is really steep. And when you have a disability, you know, it just makes the journey a little bit longer.
Mm,
I think later down the road, when I started understanding it more and more, I would agree that yes, it did play in it as an advantage. But growing up, um, it's just these small things, right? Like I can't see what the coach can't give me hand signals, right?
mm,
I can't see the scoreboard. Even in practice, right? I would always have to move to the front to make sure that I could see everything. Or sometimes have one-on-one so that they can, like, grab my hand and show me where it's supposed to go. So in terms of that aspect, I would say it was kind of a disadvantage. It's not really. It was an obstacle. It was an
mm,
obstacle. I was quite fortunate because all the coaches that I had never really treated me differently. A
mm,
lot of times people grow up with only doing judo with, people who have the disability. But I was treated like everybody else. So, I had to I had to keep up with all the sighted people. But yeah, I think that's kind of my perspective on growing up with that in judo.
mm,
Robert, I heard that in an interview that you did, that you had some experiences in elementary school or perhaps throughout your K-12 experience. Sam and I, as for background, are educators,
Okay.
former principals, for example. And I heard you mention that you made some reference that you wish that school might have been different, that teachers might have made I think you mentioned at one point that a teacher had said something that your accommodations were sort of inconvenient, that you needed large print, and the teacher, you had to request things like that. Um, so I guess one of the things that I'm wondering is what kinds of strengths do you think that uh, brought out in you in terms of having to advocate for yourself? In that, how would you want the classroom environment to be different for students who came up like you? Or what do you hope for students to be provided, not just in terms of materials, but in terms of how the classroom could feel different
Mm,
for people who have visual impairments or just needs?
mm,
sure. Yeah, I mean, growing up, I think I was a really shy person, right? So I didn't like advocating for myself and things like that. That's one thing that I had to learn and develop. So I was quite fortunate to have parents that would do that, on my behalf, right? They would talk to my teachers and stuff, especially at a younger age. But obviously, not everybody has that, right, at their disposal or access to,
Mm.
right,
And
to.
ideally, you shouldn't have to advocate, right?
Right, right. I think that's the ideal world. Realistically, people are just not as aware or knowledgeable, right? So, of course, we would like everybody to be, um, educated in ways to help students with disabilities, but in reality, that's not. always the case, as you
Hmm.
guys probably know. Um, whether I'm not really sure how we could address that. I mean, sure, trainings may help. Um, I personally just believe that they need to have experience with the student with that disability,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, kind of learn how things are a little different, right? You can treat them the same, but at the same time, they just need that extra, step for help, like large print, right? And these smaller minor things that can get them on the same playing field as their fellow students.
Mm,
Right. And for students who have a different need, it
Hmm.
really is the responsibility for us as educators to know about that need
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
to ask about it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I
mhm.
I I I agree with that.
Do you find that teachers or those around you are willing to ask you what you need even now as a grown up?
No. I think a lot of times people think it is offensive, or they're super shy, or I don't know what it is, but um, I never minded talking about my disability, how it affects my daily life.
Mhm.
I have yet to find somebody who has said, "Oh, don't ask me that. That's offensive to me," right?
Yeah.
Like most of us
Yeah.
are very open to our experience of, especially in school, like what we need. Um, but oftentimes people even come up to me and ask me like, I don't, I hope this isn't offensive, but can I ask you this and this? And it's like, ah, you don't have to start off that way. It's, you know, it's
Yeah.
just how I live my life, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think people should be afraid to ask.
Yep. So Robert, we had gone to middle school and high school together,
Hmm.
and I've seen what it's like for you in school, just like what it takes for you to learn, and you've always had that desk, that
Right.
the desk
Yeah.
that you had in middle school and high school with the camera on it and the
Hmm.
monitor.
Hmm.
I guess I've never come around to asking you about this. Oh, are you guys hearing like the notification like on my I'm getting like text. I was just wondering, you guys hear this?
I didn't hear it
Okay.
at all.
I was just wondering.
No, no, I don't.
Okay. But yeah, back to my question. So like I'd always seen your desk and I was just wondering because I'd never gotten around to asking this about you, but had you always had that desk or was that provided by DSST? Because I had known like, we had the laptops and everything throughout middle
Hmm.
school and high school. I was wondering, was that like something that they had provided to you once you had gotten into DSST, or was
Yeah,
that something that you'd always just had throughout your whole
that
life?
was provided by the public schooling system. Yeah,
What's
definitely.
DSSDT? Is that what you said?
It's it's Denver School of Science and Technology.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
yep, that's the middle school and high school that we had attended.
Hmm.
Yep.
Robert, I wanted to circle back.
Wait,
With
before if you don't mind, what was the desk and the camera? What, tell me about, what is that?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
so I needed a CCTV. Um,
Oh, yeah, we know what that is.
and it was kind of neat because they had one that you could look down at paper, but you could also flip up so that
yeah,
you could see the board, right? But it was huge. I mean, it probably weighed like 40 pounds. So they provided this cart that I could
Yep.
push around, and
Oh.
it was kind of funny. But yeah,
You had to push that
yeah,
around yourself? As a
yes,
like an
yeah,
elementary, middle, high school student, you were pushing around that?
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
oh,
It was with him
jeez.
everywhere he went, everywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, that's great
Mhm.
technology, but it probably wasn't thought through, right?
No, but we made it work. It was okay.
Yeah, because all you really want in middle and high school is to fit in,
Right,
right? Well,
right,
and in
right.
life, but especially when you're at that age
Yep,
and you're pushing around a 40-pound TV.
yep.
So you're
Yep.
strong in all kinds of ways that I hadn't even considered. Like all of that as part of the way that that might have made you feel. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I do agree with your point that, when you're in high school, the most important thing to you is fitting in, right? And obviously, yeah, when you see a kid pushing around this big cart, um, yeah, it sticks out. But I kind of grew up with that my whole life, right? Like I have albinism, which is kind of rare to see. Especially, I I I I'm my family's Japanese American, so growing up looking with pale skin and blonde hair in the Japanese community, right? It doesn't really fit, right? You kind of stick out, especially in our culture. You know, they have a saying: if you're the nail that's sticking up, you hammer it back down, right? You want to you want to fit in, but so I guess that aspect of my life was always there. I kind of learned just to like ignore it. I remember growing up as a kid, people would always just stare at myself and my brother, who also has albinism, and she would just say, "Stare back," you know. So it was always present. That
Hmm.
thought of, am I really sticking out that much that a random stranger in Costco is gonna stare at me for 5 minutes? But I just come to deal with it. It's who I am, I guess. Right? There's nothing we can
Robert,
do.
that happened to us last night in Costco, just so you know.
Really,
It
really.
did,
Okay.
yeah. So Sam walked, Sam walks with a cane and he can't
Yep.
see strangers staring, but I see them like just staring
Right. Yep.
directly in his eyes
Yep.
until he like and completely passes by. And literally everywhere I go, and on a good day I'm like people are learning, and on a bad day
Yeah.
I'm like stop it.
Right, right. And sometimes it's like if you're that curious, just ask me.
Yes.
But again, it's like you
But that
said,
can be
people
intrusive too, right?
it can be, but I'd much rather have someone come up and ask me than just stare, right? Like if you just stare at me,
Yes.
it makes me feel like uncomfortable, right? Like uh yeah, but I don't know.
So Robert, go relating to like your albinism, right?
Hmm.
This definitely it had an effect on your vision, right? Your
Yes.
albinism plays a part into your vision.
Yeah,
So
that
could you
is.
explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so albinism usually affects the skin color and the hair color. Right, there's no pigmentation in the skin. But most of the time, it also causes a visual impairment. And on some rare occasions, it actually only causes the visual impairment. It
Mm,
doesn't affect the pigmentation or the hair color.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I mean, I've met plenty of albinos who have almost perfect vision and some who have worse vision than me. So
mm-hmm.
it's all across the board.
Yep.
Robert, I wanted to circle back a little bit to you were talking a little bit about your days in education early on, and a
Hmm.
moment ago about getting the stairs in Costco and that kind of thing, because I think the two relate to this. Um, I one of these things in my 4.5 years of being blind, I have come to terms with is this concept of first. That I am the first blind person that many people know. I'm guessing
Yes.
you were the first blind student to many of your teachers, correct?
Yes.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
would agree.
And so talk to me a little bit about like what I was the first I have type 1 diabetes. I got it in when I was 10 years old. For my entire elementary school, I was the first diabetic they had. And there's this notion, I think, as a 10-year-old boy, like they're making all the first go around mistakes with me.
Yeah.
And what's that feel like? And like, I don't even know. I'm 10 years old. I don't even know what advocacy means. I'm told to just obey adults and
Hmm.
listen to them, and they have my best interest. What do you experience that concept of first? And what was that like back then? And what's it like now? Has it changed?
Yeah,
Or how do you
I think growing up it was actually pretty aligned with what you just said. Um, I think it wasn't until like midway through college I started having a different perception of that
Mm.
if I am the first, right,
yeah.
then I'm leading the way for people to follow. So, I have to advocate, right? I have to to make people aware, just so that people behind me will not run into the same problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Do you ever get tired of it though? Like you've been
uh,
blind longer than I have. I got 4.5 years in, and there's
mhm.
times where it's like I don't want to be your teacher right now. I just want you to be able to tell me where the bathroom is here, without me describing to you how you need to tell me. You ever get tired of it?
Yeah, I I not really. I think it's
No.
because it was most of my life. I mean, I do say, like, sometimes it can be slightly irritating, I guess, but I kind of learn how to just filter it out, I guess. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, one of the things, right, is like I do agree, like, with your Matthew situation, or like for me, when I'm looking at a menu, I have to zoom in on my phone, right? So
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
like this, and people are like, what do you do? Or even in just
Yes.
regular public, when I'm on my phone, right? Like
Yep.
it's like right here, right? And people are like, why is his face in the in the
Know
phone?
the feeling.
So, sometimes it can get to you. I would say though that, like, you learn how to, I don't know, block it, put it in the back of your mind, and yeah.
I heard you say, Robert, that something changed in college in
hmm
terms of your thoughts about your advocacy. What was that?
Yeah, so actually it was because when I came back from the Paralympics, my university, USC, is known for sending a lot of Olympians every year, or every 4 years. And then some crazy stat, like if they were a country by themselves, they would be ranked like 15th in attendees, some crazy something like that, right? So when
Wow.
I got to go, I was really excited. Like, I was
Mm.
like, I'm a part of this culture. And when I came back, I learned that they had a event at a football game, right after the Olympics, in between the Paralympics, right? So all the Paralympians were skipped. And I sat
Mm.
down with their, like, sports coordinator or whatever, and they apologized. And I was like, surely I'm not the only Paralympian here. And their response was, we don't know. And I'm thinking to myself,
Ah.
Oh.
this is like a D1 school who is known for their athletics. You don't know? Like, and they said, we have no record. We don't even know if you're the first one to attend here.
Mm.
And I think that was the moment that my mind kind of shifted, you know, because I wasn't sure if I was either, but I was thinking, if I am, I want more Paralympians to come, right? I love this school, and I want them to be a part of this culture. And I found out that there was another person who was actually on the track team at USC who competed in the Paralympics.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, again, it comes back to people just, they're not educated, they don't know, right? But
Yeah.
these type of things is like the Paralympics. They most people think it's para because it's paraplegic, but it's para because it's
Mhm.
runs parallel to the Olympic Games, right? It's supposed to be seen as the same level of event. So
Mm.
I think that's kind of the moment where I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm probably a first for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try my best to make them aware, so that next time someone comes in with a disability, you know, they have experience with me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Sometimes, I thought, like, okay, maybe I'm like being a little annoying and pushing it too far, but it's like for simple things, like large print. I need to sit in the front. It's like, these are in reality small asks, right? They're not
Mm.
big tasks. They're just minor things a teacher can do to make someone with a disability, again, get on that same playing field as their students, as fellow
Mm.
students, right? But yeah, that was kind of my take on that.
Yeah. So like growing up, from high school and middle school, having DSST kind of, I guess like how they provided the you said CCTV for you and
Hmm.
everything. They did have play a part, advocating for you on their end, by giving you the necessary, technology to be able to succeed in school, or at least help you, you know, in school, on your day to day. I
Yeah.
was wondering, when it came to, college, we all go our separate ways. We're mostly becoming more independent.
Hmm.
And especially, we're not around our parents, as much as
Right.
we are, in high school or middle school. So there's not that dependence there. I was wondering, how was your experience in college, especially going to such a big university like USC? And also, um, did you bring your desk with you, and or like how were you able to navigate school, especially on a big campus like USC, getting around from, one class to the next, or,
Yeah.
doing your homework and turning in assignments? Like how did, college and university life look for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say when I did first move to college, it was kind of a struggle for say the first month. Um, all across the board. I mean, navigation, right? Obviously, I didn't know USC is a pretty small campus, right? But when you have a disability and there's like a ton of people around you, it seems overwhelming. You can't really find places. So there was that aspect, and I did not take my cart with me. I actually started using a monocular. Um,
What's a
and
monocular?
Are those the glasses?
no, monocular is basically like just one side of the binocular. So kind of like a
Oh,
scope or something.
oh, okay.
Um, but I'd still sit in the front. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I always had this feeling that yes, I'm sticking out, right? Because you see this guy sitting in the front of the classroom who's looking down this like scope at the board, right? So
Yeah.
there was that. But in terms of doing work, I actually found it a little easier because, in high school and middle school, a lot of stuff was on paper.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to college, almost 95% of everything I turned in was uploaded, right? So
Yep.
that made it a little bit more accessible. If it was on
Mm-hmm.
paper, it was normally a test, and I could take it at the disability center, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had a CCTV. So, yeah, I mean, overall, it was a little bit kind of like getting up to speed, I guess you could call it. But, once I was settled, um, yeah, it was fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So like, away from like, turning in assignments in university, just focusing on school, how is it like in your experience, living on your own or having a roommate or
Hmm.
dorming? Like, what was your experience in that? Were there place did they accommodate you in your like living situation, or did you have to mostly advocate for yourself like you have been for like most of your life?
Yeah, I was mostly advocating for myself. I actually transferred my first from my first year to SC, so I got last pick on housing, and I
Mm.
was placed in the oldest dorm on campus. Right, it
Oh.
was from like the 50s last time it was renovated, and I was fortunate. My roommate at the time was really good. We're still friends today. It was a good learning experience for being independent. Would I do it again? No. But
Hmm.
was it worth it? Yes. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, that was kind of kind of this living situations and stuff.
Yeah. Can you share with us, like, do you have any stories or experience that like stands out to you that from that time period that like you'd want to share?
In
Because I
terms
know
of like
like,
the dorm,
yeah, because I know like growing up, like, going to college for the first time and, dorming, it's just
yeah,
like crazy. You don't know who your roommate may be, or like, what you may run into, what the city is like. Because we
yeah,
both went out of state, right? Like
right,
you're trying to navigate a whole new place.
right.
And that's in itself kind of scary. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, just from my experience, I know it was kind of like, it was, I had a little bit of paranoia and everything was brand new. And, I could only imagine what your experience is like. So like, I there has to be some kind of story, I guess,
Yeah,
that you
there's
must have, you know?
there's definitely a time I agree with you 100%. But in terms of like the living situation, I mean, to be honest, like there wasn't anything that stood out because of my disability. It was
Mm,
more just like universal. Like there were 100 freshmen on my floor and
yeah.
three
Oh my.
bathrooms. So,
Oh, wow.
if you can imagine, like that was not a
Yeah.
fun time, right? Um, in terms of exploring outside,
Hmm.
there were times where I was lost. And if you don't know, USC is in South Central Los Angeles, which
Yeah.
is, kind of the not the best of neighborhoods. Uh, and there were times where I was like really, really scared, and I'm like, I don't know where I am, for sure. Um, but I'm still alive, so everything
Yep.
worked out. Um, I will say in terms of like socially, at first it was pretty hard. I think there were multiple aspects to that. Yes, it's really hard as like person with a disability, but I also transferred, which is kind of hard, and I
Mhm.
was like training full time, so I
Mm,
didn't have a lot of time. When I finished the games, um, I retired because I wanted to finish up school and do other things with my life. And I guess yes, it is really hard again to meet new people. Um, I always felt like when I met somebody new, they would have that situation where people stare, right? It is a similar way, but I'm forcing them to talk to me now. So they're
mhm.
in this like
Mm.
awkward state, right? They're just like they're really shy, they're like really quiet, and yeah, I mean, I think again, it's like they feel a little uncomfortable because they don't have any experience with somebody who has a disability, right? But
Mhm,
yeah, I don't know, like I feel like I'm able to hold a conversation like a normal any other person, right? So like,
mhm.
people just have to just
Yeah.
talk, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Robert, I may follow up or piggyback on that because this is an area, I'm gonna lean on you for a little advice here, and probably some of our listeners too. Um, and one caveat before I begin, I lost my vision around 4.5 years ago, so you know, a lot of my finding my way happened in isolation because we were in a pandemic. Okay,
Mm,
so a lot of the social interactions I have, and I still do to this day, are kind of via telephone. I found groups, we meet up, we talk. I found some individual friends from that. But doing anything in person with like a blind friend, I haven't had one experience yet, and I've tried. So you know, do you give me some help here, like, or some tips? Like, do you, when what do you do? How do you find or meet new people? Are most of your friends blind? Are they mostly sighted? Are they a little bit of both? Talk to me.
yeah.
Help a man out here.
So I'd say mine is a little bit of both, right? Most of my friends I've made during my time through judo, that have a visual impairment. But
Um,
I do have a lot of friends who did other sports as well. And honestly, that's my biggest recommendation is get involved with, you know maybe not a sport, but the first thing that comes to my mind is a sport. So like I don't know if you know what goalball is.
No.
It's a sport designed for um, blind athletes, and it is a Paralympic sport, but it's been growing. And even if you're not like a hardcore player, it can be a recreational thing, right? The same thing with judo. Judo can be a recreational thing. It's a little bit harder, right, because it's full contact martial art. But there are the point I'm trying to make is there's sports, right, that are designed for people who have the same experience as you out there, so that you can do these sports the same as people around you. Um, outside of that, I don't really think I know a lot of people with a disability outside of sports. Most of my
Okay, yeah.
friends are sighted. Um,
So let me pick your brain a little bit. That so like you're hanging out with sighted friends, and
yeah.
they want to do something,
Hmm.
um, and it's visually dependent
Sure.
or whatever. How do they navigate that with you? Is it like, wait a minute, we're not going to go to a movie. Robert's not going to enjoy this, or
it's
how do
it's
because
Well,
I
and
find,
to be fair with
yeah,
Robert, I can speak to that with Sam. We're open and we're in a marriage, and we talk about that a lot. So if it's not,
yeah.
I already know he's not going to do that. So I can imagine what that must be like for you, but maybe
Yeah.
that's just our imagination about it.
It's kind of funny because that movie thing, right? That has happened to me, right? Where it's
right,
like
right,
friends want to go to the movie, and I'm like, I don't want to go to the movie because either we're gonna sit in the front row and I'm gonna miss half the movie,
right,
or
right,
or or we're sitting in the back and I just wasted $20, right? Like,
right,
um, to be honest, though, like I mean, like most of my friends that I tell them, I've learn I mean, they know of the situation, right? So all I have to be is like, I can't see, and they're like, oh, okay, and then we find something else. But I also learned it helps to kind of add this like humorous thing into it,
yeah,
right? Make a little joke like, oh, you want the blind guy to go watch a movie, like, you know
right,
these small bits of humor, I think really help lighten the mood, right? Because again, people don't want to be offensive. So if you
Right.
come off
yeah,
as a very light and humorous mood, like, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it
It
makes them
invites
more
the
comfortable as well.
conversation. Yep.
Exactly, exactly. And most of the time, people are accommodating. If they aren't, I probably wouldn't hang out with them again, to be honest. Um, yeah, I will say though, like, especially living in Los Angeles, one of the biggest obstacles I've run into is not being able to drive because
yeah.
our public
Mm.
transportation system is terrible. So oftentimes my friends will have to pick me up, right?
Got it.
And I do recognize that, yes, that is an inconvenience for them. Um, but I mean, otherwise, how are we gonna hang out, right? Like, if I take
Yeah,
Hmm.
public transportation, it's gonna take me two hours to go, what, like 10 miles,
Yep.
right.
or I'm gonna fork out like a ton of money for Uber, right? That's not really reasonable. So I have learned that people are flexible and they're willing to help you
Yeah,
out, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Let me kind of go across a different bridge with you if you're willing to come across with me. But when I say this, like I'm asking for a friend, Robert, Cayman, Christine, I mean it. I'm asking for friends. This is okay. I mean it because usually
Uh-oh. What's
people
happening here?
when usually people say that they're
I
like they
don't know where
really
he's
mean
going,
for them.
Robert.
They really
Yeah.
mean from themselves.
Uh-oh.
Well, you just mentioned, Robert, I should try to be funny about talking, making things lighter. So here we go. But I truly am asking for other folks. People, I volunteer, Robert, a lot in the blind community,
Hmm.
and I talk with people. It's like a one-on-one kind of thing. We talk about blindness, mostly the emotional aspects of it. I've been
Hmm.
asked a number of times by single people about dating. And because they lost their vision at a time where they didn't have a significant other, I was very fortunate.
Right.
Not only was I was married to my best friend. We have a very solid marriage. So I really, truly am asking for them. But like, if you're okay, if you're cool with it, talk a little bit about that because like I get asked questions like, do I try to date sighted people? Do I try to date blind people? Where do I go? Are there,
Sure.
like, and I'm like not really equipped to answer. So now that I have you here and you seem like a pretty cool guy, you are a cool guy. Tell me,
He's
give me some, enlighten me.
Well,
What do we tell these peeps? How
can
do,
can I just let Robert off the hook a slight amount and say we're going to also ask Cayman.
oh,
Oh.
all right, there we go.
no.
All right.
I mean, they are both around the same age, and it
He's
is
on the
only
hook with you,
fair. It is
Robert. Whoever
only
wants to
fair.
go first, all right? So yeah, yeah, I'm just, I'm fascinated by it, but like for the benefit of like other folks that I know are probably listening and trying to figure this out,
Hmm.
you know, what's your take on this?
Yeah. So that is an interesting topic because I will say it is harder. Like the m- fact of the matter is it is harder with a disability to date.
Mm.
Um, in terms of dating people with a disability versus sighted people, it's a case to case basis. I mean, uh, it's a lot harder to find somebody who is going to be understanding, right? But and a lot of my friends who are visually impaired actually date or are married or with people who also have that disability because they both understand it,
Yeah,
right? The way
yeah,
of living is similar. um but it has happened on I've seen the other side of it is there are people who date sighted people. I myself am dating somebody who is sighted, right? So it's I would say it's about finding that person that is understanding, and to them it's not an obstacle, right? It's
yeah.
not now how to go about doing that. um
Well,
that's hard,
I
right?
hate to bring a I hate to bring a bad like blind date joke here, but how did you meet the person that you're dating?
Yeah, that's what
I
I was wondering.
met on it was a dating app. I forgot which one it
Okay,
was.
no,
But
cool enough.
um yeah, I mean that's kind of the era we're going into, right? And
Yep.
Yeah, it's yeah,
we're
I
in it.
oh, sorry. What were you saying?
No, we're in it. We're in the
Oh,
era.
okay.
You're right. We're in it.
I will
Full on.
say though that in terms of in my experience with that,
uh-huh.
it is hard, right? Because
Yeah,
the first thing another person sees is your picture, and below that, you probably know that you're disabled, and there's no connection or interaction, right? So their first instinct is going to say no, right? So it is harder than meeting someone in person, in my opinion,
Mm.
Yes.
right? Because when you're in
Yes.
person you have that connection with the person, right? It's not as superficial, I guess, right? It's a little
You've
bit
said so many important things there. The connection piece, right? It's like
yes,
capitalism took over love.
right.
Mhm.
In terms of
And
finding somebody, yeah, I mean, my best advice is just like get out there, join a club or there.
connect.
Exactly. And if you're in school, it's a little easier, right? There's clubs on campus. If you're not in
Mm.
school, Facebook, great place to meet people. There's plenty of apps out there that try to connect people of similar passions, right? Similar hobbies. And yeah, from my experience, that is, you know, the best place. But I mean, again, to be honest, it is harder. And what I would take away from that is you're not alone. Okay, don't
yeah.
ever feel like you're alone in this in the struggle. It is really
Mm,
hard. It is really hard. But if it gives you comfort out there, there are other people who are going through the same problem. There are people who were in your situation and now are married with a family, right? So yeah, I mean, I
Yep.
guess that's my advice.
Uh,
Yep. Everybody will find their person, you know? It's just a
Exactly.
matter of
You
time,
you just have to
right?
be proactive of looking, right? You can't. The worst thing to do is say like, "Ah, I really want to date somebody," but never go out, right?
Exactly.
How are you gonna find somebody if you never get out there, right?
Yeah.
So is if you're being proactive about it, if you have friends that are helping you, it's only a matter of time. You know,
Hmm.
that time frame nobody knows, but eventually, right? Eventually, there's what 8 billion people out there, right?
Lots.
Statistically speaking,
I love that.
somebody will come along who has the understanding and the same hobbies or something, right?
yeah,
That
yeah.
matches you guys together.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's my advice on that.
So, matter of fact, Robert, that you brought up the fact that you do have a sighted partner, right? I was wondering what's your story behind that? Like, how'd you guys meet? That's very interesting.
Yeah, met on a dating app.
Hmm.
Um,
And like, what's your experience? I just realized you just said that, but like, what's your what's your experience with them? Like how do you guys like what do you guys like to do? Do you guys go out to eat? Like what do you guys like to do together? What is she like? Is she like I don't know.
Yeah,
Tell
so
me a little bit about that.
probably food is a big hobby. Watching movies indoor, inside the house. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, one of the biggest struggles is the driving, right?
Yeah.
Like especially in LA, it's sometimes hard to beat up in person. So we shoot for, I don't know, like once or twice a week, right? Which I feel like is about normal for LA. Um, it's just other things too, like sometimes we like going out of the city. We take a trip to the beach or Malibu. Bowling is fun. I can't really see the pins, but you line it up and you throw it straight. Um, it's just these small things. I think what we really enjoy doing though is like planning out these small trips to
Mm.
places. We like traveling, adventure, so things like that. um
We do that too, Robert. We
yeah.
really we
Yeah.
really enjoy connecting by doing things together. And that I can remember just 4 years ago, when Sam became blind, I actually Googled, do blind people travel? I know that sounds strange, but I was
There's certain
like,
perks we get to skip security
Yeah.
line, you
Yeah.
board first, right?
well, Skip is a strong, but Sam has a guide dog, and
Oh,
getting
I see, I
Sam
see.
through the security, and then he has to
Mm,
walk without the dog. Anyway, that's a whole
yeah,
nother episode, but
yeah.
travel is a good experience because there's
Yep.
It
so much more
is,
to travel than sight.
it
And
is.
I didn't understand that quite as well until I had the fortune of doing that with my husband. It's a
Mm.
great experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I'd say my experience has been probably pretty aligned with of what you would expect, right? There's only these minor inconveniences. So it's like it's just like growing up with a disability, right? You just have these minor inconveniences that you learn how to overcome on a day-to-day basis. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not really that different in my opinion from what a normal relationship should look like, right? There's again, I think the best trait to have though for them is understanding, right?
Yeah.
If your
Mhm.
partner is understanding, then everything will be will be good.
Yep.
I'm dying to ask him a question. Can I? I'm
Of
dying to know
course.
how.
Of course.
How did you manage, like, for all the students who are leaving high school, headed to college, and are athletes?
Mm,
How do you, how did you manage all of that? Like, all of the training, all of the academics on such a high level. What is, how do you handle that mentally? And
sure.
how do you keep it? Because you probably are on 12 hours a day doing
Yeah.
that, if it's anything like what I see with our really high level athletes. What advice do you have for those guys heading into college, or people heading into college towards
Right.
athletics and college?
So, yes, I mean there's a lot that is going to be sacrificed. You will not have the same experience as other people in college. But it's because you're training to be different, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it. That is the
Mm.
mindset I would have. And so on a
Mm.
day-to-day basis, my schedule consisted of training in the morning, there was running and weightlifting, classes during the day, judo at night, right? So, and this was like Monday through Friday, Saturday would just be judo practice. So my schedule was mostly two things. I lived a very boring life. um,
But
eh,
busy.
busy, yes, and I, I don't regret it. I don't regret it, but there is a lot that I missed out on, right? And not even like social aspects. It's also networking, right?
Mm.
Networking for a career after. Um, but these are things you have to understand going into it, and if your goal is really to be uh, you know, an athlete or whatever you want to be, you'll be willing to sacrifice those things, put
Mm-hmm.
those things aside. Um, yeah, it's
So,
funny because people ask like they always ask, they think it's like it is difficult, don't get me wrong, the journey is difficult, but the path is very easy, right? It's just consistency, hard work, right? It's a very easy path. It's just
mm,
the journey of doing that path is going through it, to be honest, is like hell, right? Like you always sore, always catching up on work, always, trying to keep up. And for me, it did pay off, but if I didn't make the games, right, like it would have been it would have been hard.
Yeah.
But
so when you're at that spot and you
hmm
want to quit,
hmm
because all athletes, I, I'm I would
definitely,
guess. It's so
absolutely.
hard and it requires such commitment and such sacrifice.
hmm
How do you keep going? Like, what did you have a mantra? How do
Yeah,
you just
so
break your week down into small parts? What is the strategy for someone who's saying, I'm really good at this, but I'm done?
for me, uh I'm sure most athletes have this, but you have your highs and your lows, and it's a constant fluctuation like this, where some days you're feeling great, right? You're like, okay, for me, it was making weight, I'm on weight, I'm doing my training, it's good. Other days it's at the bottom, right? You're like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
drowning in schoolwork, I'm struggling to find the motivation to go to practice, right? So there's these constant highs and lows. So when you're at your low, for me, I would break it down into smaller bits until I could do it, right? So sometimes it was by the day. I'm going to get through
Mm-hmm.
today. Other times it got broken down to like, just going. I'm going to go to the train to get to practice, right? That was my goal. But
Mm.
if you're able to almost trick your mind into breaking things down into smaller goals, when you accomplish that, right, you'll feel a little bit more of a push, right? Like, okay, I'm on the train to practice. Let's get through practice, right?
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
get through practice, you're like, all right, let's go home. Let's just knock out, one class's homework. You do that, and you're like, okay, I'm still doing good. I have a good rhythm. Let's do another class's homework, right? So my biggest recommendation is breaking it down, right? Making really small goals for yourself. A guy who does this is Shohei Otani. He
Mm-hmm.
writes out his day by the second, right? For me, that's insane. I would never schedule my day of like, okay, I'm in the shower for this amount of minutes, and then I take 30 seconds to dry off, and then that to me is ridiculous. But that's a great example of somebody who is really successful, and he found his way to do it, right? He was able to break down his day, and that's how he likes to do it, right? For me, it wasn't to that extreme, but I would like to schedule things out, right? Like, you know, I would do by the hour, or certain things. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, again, circling back to the first point, for those who want to be, a professional athlete or something like that, you need to understand the path ahead of you. And if you do, you know, nobody will deviate you from that path. Um,
Yeah, and the path ahead means challenge, reward,
yes.
and lots of um, self motivation.
hmm Yes.
Lots of
Uh,
that.
in my experience, when I first started college, my judo coaches told me that if I wanted to make Tokyo, there was no way I would be able to balance school and judo at the same time.
Mm.
And for my parents, you know, school would come first, right? And I do agree with that. I think if you are going to choose between the two, I think school gives you a much better foundation for after, because you can only be an athlete for so long, right? But if you become a professional, that's your life career. Anyways, I had both of these sides telling me like, no, you either do judo in school, you only do school, you only do judo. And I told myself that I think it's possible to do both. And it was, but there was a lot again that I didn't get to experience, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't regret it. I think that was the right choice, right?
Mm.
And I guess it's easy to say because I did accomplish my goal, right? We may have a different situation if I didn't make Tokyo, but um,
It
I don't
sounds
know.
like it sounds like underneath that you had non-negotiables.
Yeah,
What were they, and are they the same now?
what do you mean by
Like things
non-negotiables?
that really mattered to you in spite of what
Mm,
other people were trying to pull you
I
towards.
see.
Like you said, your parents were thinking this and your
Hmm.
coaches were thinking that.
Yeah.
And underneath that, Robert decided what was going to happen. Like
Yeah.
you rooted into something. What
So I
was
guess
that?
I guess there's multiple things. I mean, I'm making Tokyo was a goal since I was a little kid, right? The minute I found out that Japan was hosting the Olympics,
Mm,
I
your home
really wanted
country.
to go. Exactly, because my heritage is Japanese. Judo came from Japan. It just everything aligned, and growing
Hmm.
up, I was like, I'm gonna make Tokyo. Um, Oop, can you hear me? Did I mute
Yep,
myself?
we got you.
Oh, okay. And so that was that aspect, but the other part of it, I don't know. For me, I love when someone tells me that they don't think I can do it because my favorite thing to do is proving people wrong. I love
Hmm.
that feeling of making them eat their words and like, you told me I couldn't do this, but here I am, right? So that was another big motivation for me. um I mean, I've always kind of been like that. Growing up, people always told me like, "Oh, you can't compete with these sighted guys, right?" And
Yeah.
you know, I was like, "Oh, I'll prove you wrong." Well, you know, um, sometimes I don't. Sometimes they're right, but I think for me, that was a big mentality I had at that time was, I'm gonna do both, and I'm gonna show you how to do it.
Yeah.
uh,
Mm.
cause again, it was two sides, right? My parents wanted school, and often in judo or sports in general, people sacrifice their education to pursue their goal. And you know, there's different opinions on it. My opinion is, again, you can only do the sport for so long, right? So I wanted to be in the middle to say like, I'm gonna succeed at this, but I'm also gonna establish a foundation for a career after, because I knew judo was not gonna last forever. It's hard sport.
Hmm.
Body can only take so much. But yeah, that was kind of my mentality on that.
What I'm so fascinated by this and wondered about your mindset and going into. Did you have a mental preparation that you used to head into the Paralympics? I'm curious
Uh,
about that.
yeah, I mean, I did want to do the best I could. Um, but I mean, to be all honest, my goal my whole life was going. I never really like set the goal to medal, right? Of
Okay.
course, it would be great to medal. But the problem is when you get to that level of competition, to
Hmm.
progress each level takes an enormous amount of effort, right? The guys I was competing against didn't go to school. They were getting, government funding from their
Mm,
countries, right? So I was coming up against guys who were like being treated like football players, right? They have this ton, they're making money, right? That's their living. Their job is to wake up, do judo all day. So I had that understanding of going into it.
Mm.
Um, Honestly, my when I first like got there, I was just trying to take everything in. That was my goal. Is just like, this has been the thing I've been, working towards for what, like 15 years of my life. So let's make the most of it. And yeah, I think I did, especially with COVID. COVID sucked, but I think of what I could have. I took in. I had a lot of fun. It was a good experience.
just that
That's great.
perspective that you
So,
Good for
were
you.
in the moment is beautiful to imagine.
Yep.
Robert, what do
Robert,
you
bring us
do
up to
now?
current
What's
day.
your
What do you? Oh yeah, I was just going to
yeah,
say that. Go
same
ahead, Christine.
question. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, what do you do for work now? What do you do?
Yeah, so right now I am a international tax consultant at Ernst& and Young. I do it's called transfer pricing. I I'm sure a lot of people don't know what that is, but basically we do taxes or we find the taxes for intercompany transactions. So if a company owns another company in another country, right, that transaction between the two. The basic example I could give is if you take a big company, say like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or a big company, and there's in the U.S. and they're producing sugar in Cuba, right? Even though they have a company in Cuba, you can't just ship it to the U.S. You have to pay right a markup on that. So that's what I do. I find that markup. Um, it's probably boring, probably really boring, but that is what I currently do. I did graduate with a degree in economics, so I enjoy economics a lot. My job is
Yeah.
mostly economics, I
Yeah.
say. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean that's kind of what I currently do. I did retire from judo, competing anyways. I still like going to practice once in a while, especially it's a good stress reliever. But I really enjoy teaching. I do like teaching judo. And I had the time to, try other things. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've seen the big Japanese drums, the taiko.
Hmm.
I got really into that. Um, a lot of other things that I did. I got missed out when I was doing judo. I got to
Okay.
experience. So yeah,
Nice.
it's
I
good.
love that you're doing your full-time gig, you've got outside interests, you're working out, you have a rich social life. That's just great, and you've made it a point to put yourself first and just go out there and get that. Good
Hmm.
for you. Good for you. You're really you're really a model for anyone, just the way you're living your life. We've asked you a ton of questions. Was there anything that maybe we like to ask our guests? Anything maybe that we missed and you wish that you could share with our listeners?
Uh, oh. um, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I don't know what to ask. I guess something to share. I guess just the point to leave behind is I would recommend that you look at your disability not as an obstacle but as a opportunity.
Hmm.
It is a
Mm,
door to a lot of opportunities that you may or may not know, right?
Hmm.
For me, it was judo.
mm,
But yeah, I think that is the best way to go about it. Just have a positive mindset. Again, add a little humor in there. Everyone likes humor,
Yes, indeed.
and yeah, I mean we we live with the cards we're dealt, right?
Yep.
And we make the best of it. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Robert, you've been a great. I in my volunteer work, I talk with people who are newly blind, and most of the
Mm,
time it's vision loss after
yep.
having a significant sighted life, much like
Mm,
myself. And some of the early questions early on are like, what am I going to do now? I can't do all these things.
mm,
And I just want to thank you for being their counterpoint, that answer to that question. Um, that there's just tremendous possibility, and it's been done, and it's been done.
right.
I would say in style.
Right.
So here's Robert Tanaka, and you're welcome. And there you go. There's no excuse. You can do it too. Um, if you, and I think your advice and you're such a source of inspiration. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and if any of your listeners are interested in starting judo or have questions, I'm happy for them to reach out. um, or just even if just talk, right? Like sometimes it's hard just to connect with people who have a similar situation as you. You know,
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to help out, and yeah.
Thank
Well,
you
be
for your
careful, Robert. It
generosity.
might be recruiting you to do some other work here. Okay,
Yeah,
so
of
you got a
course, of
full
course.
life, but just be careful what you're putting out there, bud.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah, there's a lot of places out here in LA that are really trying to push for bringing disabled people together, especially athletes that I really like being involved with, right? Because I didn't really have that growing up, you
Yeah,
know,
Mm.
and sometimes I wonder if people are even aware of it, right?
Mm.
So these are kind of just I mean,
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
yeah. So
Thank you all for.
Is it time for the Fast Five?
Oh,
Oh
sure. Do you
yeah,
have
don't
them?
All
forget.
right, Cayman,
Don't.
you're on. You're going to be up. You got to ask Robert a Fast Five question. I can
I
kick it
have
off.
one.
I have a couple. Christine, why don't you kick off?
Okay, Robert. We
Okay.
should tell you the fast five are just really quick answers to questions.
okay,
Spontaneous,
Okay.
impulsive, just answer.
Spontaneous.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, I
okay.
have. Do you want to go first, Sam?
No, go ahead, Christine. I have a
Okay.
couple,
Uh,
and then Cayman will. You could throw something out there too,
okay.
if
Okay.
you like, Cayman.
Favorite accessibility device.
Ooh, the monocular.
Oh.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
Favorite non-tech blind hack, like around your house?
Non-tech blind hack.
Yes.
um, that's a hard one. I don't even know.
What's one of yours, Sam?
I have these like rubber black pads, and I like so my bathroom sink. It's to the left, and I know when I touch that pad, I know exactly where I am in relationship to all my bathroom supplies. So it's just this. It's actually one of. It's something that I think Christine used for hot curling irons
It was a curling iron pad.
pad,
Like,
Oh,
and
I see.
it's
and it.
tactile. It's to the left of my sink. If you move it, I'm like I get lost, and but I know if I touch that with my left hand, I know it's a half a step this way to this, so it's a little bit of a hack. I have braille bumps, like little dots on microwaves,
Hmm.
that kind of non-tech braille hack kind of deal.
That.
I'd say for oh sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'd say for me it's for like spices and stuff. I put them in different size containers, and
Yeah. Okay.
I know which one is which size because I
Mm.
like buying the bulk one from Costco, but they all are the same container.
All
So
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
All right, I got another one for you here, Robert. You talked about, like, you didn't say it this way, underdog energy. Love
Mhm.
it. Motivates you when you get people to eat their words and prove them wrong. What's your favorite psych up song that goes? What's that reel that's playing in your? What music are you hearing? Whose voice is it
The
when
theme
you're?
from Rocky. Just kidding.
Well, I'm Philly. I'm a Philly
Wait,
fan, so
we're
we really relate to the
and we're a whole
underdog.
nother generation too. He
Yeah,
probably
we're a
doesn't know
generation,
that.
but
Um, that's a hard question too. These are hard questions.
They're not fast.
Um,
what's on your playlist? Like when it's time and you're like, oh man, it's the end of the day. I got like 10 more
Sit
planks,
ups.
whatever it is, sit ups. What music are you hearing?
um, it's probably like "Wake Me Up" by Avicii. That's a good one,
Damn.
or
I'm the
something
man.
upbeat like that. Yeah, maybe like reggaeton. Like Latin music that kind
Oh,
of gets
Mm,
the
Oh wow.
energy going.
yep.
Yeah, Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny's good.
hmm
Bad Bunny.
Okay, got it. All right,
All right,
Cayman,
I've
you got
got one.
anything?
Yep. All right. So, Robert, we grew up around, great Mexican food, and we're both Japanese. So,
Mhm.
choose between one. And
Oh
you're
my
also in
God.
LA. Which one?
These questions
Japanese
are
food or
so
Mexican
hard.
food?
Ah,
It's so off topic.
I gotta
Not
go.
what you expected.
I gotta go with Japanese food. I think Mexican
Mm,
food out here is fantastic, but it's what I grew up with. So
mm.
yeah, the Japanese food.
I respect it.
All
I
right, you're
respect
from
it.
Denver. You live in LA. Who's your NFL team?
Uh-oh.
It better be the
Uh-oh.
Broncos.
Uh-oh. It's
Yeah,
the Eagles, of
probably
course.
the Broncos. Probably the
Oh, okay, he's gonna
Broncos.
stay
Yeah.
true. Got it. All
Yeah.
right. Are you
Let's
saying that just
go.
because Cayman's here, or do you?
Nah.
No,
No,
Nah.
good. All right,
It's
good.
Nah.
it's
True and true. That's what I like to hear.
There we go. Got to represent the 303.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
right. Do cats or dogs?
Dogs. I'm allergic
There
to
you go.
cats.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, and that's all the torture we have.
I think
for you
that's
today.
5. Yeah.
Thank you again for joining us on Not Exactly As We Expected. All of the tools and tips and things we'll have in our show notes for our listeners who can also ask questions of our guests and suggest future episodes. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciated it, and it was a great time.
Yes.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank everyone for listening. Please follow us, Spotify, YouTube. Drop us a like or a dislike. Let us know what you think.
Just a like. If
Just
they
a
don't like it, they can
Yeah,
write us
I'm
a little
okay with
message.
this stuff, yeah.
All right, thanks. Thank you for listening to Not Exactly As We Expected. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by liking us on Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.